I guess, Arthur, in the aftermath of this one, how does it feel? Does it feel like a point gained or 2 points dropped?
Feels like a loss, to be honest with you. We'll definitely take the point, but yeah, it feels like a loss.
I guess, why does it feel like a loss?
Because we started the game ever so well and were quite dominant, and things were looking great. You know, we were on top, but in the end, we weren't clinical enough to just put the other one in. I think, you know, that game was waiting there for us to score the second, and they were sitting there. They were vulnerable, and we just didn't have the killer punch tonight, and in the end, it's cost us.
I guess, what do you put that down to? Was it just a mentality thing for the boys? Were they flat? Were they fatigued? What did you identify?
No, not really. I think in the first half, you know, I was very pleased with the football, the dominancy, and, you know, the territory, and, you know, the intent, the intensity, you know, the energy was great. But in the end, you got to keep going. You know, we've got to be a little bit more dangerous in front of goal, and I just felt that we didn't. You know, in the end, we weren't dangerous enough in the box, and that's not good enough for us. We've got to keep going. We've got to be a little bit more clinical and more ruthless, and, you know, put them to bed.
Their level of frustration as well, and that I know last week obviously you beat Wellington, but the late goals that have been conceded, is there any level of frustration with that, or the way that they're coming about maybe?
Look, the second half for me, the most disappointing part is that we lost a little bit of control of the match, and, you know, we lost the ball, and we got a little bit stretched at times, you know, because they're very direct, and if you don't keep your shape and you open up, you know, then you leave gaps, and, you know, we became vulnerable when we lost control of the ball, and then ultimately allowed them to hurt us a little bit. And we've got to be better in those moments. You know, we can't have the ball the whole time, and there's times where the other team is going to get the ascendancy, and that's okay. You know, that's football. But during those moments, we just got to be a little bit better in terms of our structure, our discipline, and just focus a little bit more, roll the sleeves up and say, okay, you got the ball for the next couple of minutes, but we'll just grind this period out and get back on top. And, you know, we struggled to get the ball and do what we normally do with it, you know, in that last probably quarter of the match, and that's where we fell short.
You mentioned before the lack of clinical finishing. I know it was something that was a problem earlier in the season. Is it something that feels like then, or is it you look at how, you know, well and clinical you scored against Wellington last week and go, oh, just a bit of a down one in terms of that side of things?
Yeah, I think it's just one of those downers, and, you know, in the end, you know, we've scored a great goal, and you know, a great ball from one, and a great finish from Charles, and, you know, not just the goal. You know, the first half, I thought, you know, the football was excellent. You know, we're getting wave after wave. Any ball that was coming out, we're picking up second balls, and it was very dominant. But, you know, being that dominant and only 1-0 up when they're there, to really be killed, and we didn't. And that you know, when I look back at everything, that's probably going to be the most frustrating part. You know, the second half, it happens. Teams are going to come back. They came out better in the second half, naturally, and, you know, we had to be better, and we weren't.
Just Charles, is that a positive you take out of it? Not just that he scored, but the first touch he had was great, and obviously a lovely finish too. The confidence that can give your team as well. Yeah,
you know, I've said all along, Charles is a fantastic player who's going to get better and better with every game. And today it wasn't just his goal. You know, that goal is so calm under pressure, and a great finish. But his general play was excellent. You know, he was a constant threat there. You know, he couldn't get bullied. You know, if anything, he was bullying them, and, you know, he was great. I thought, you know, with and without the ball, added so much value to us, and, you know, the goal tops it off for him, which makes it nice for him, you know, especially to score at home. So, and again, he'll continue to get better. You know, we're seeing the beginning of Charles, and there's a high ceiling there, and he'll continue to improve and get better, and the team will be better for it.
You're talking about, like, the game being there to be taken, killed off, and just not being able to do it. Feels like we've discussed that after a few games this season with your side. I guess now, how do you impart that killer instinct on your side with not a lot of the season remaining, so that you can develop it, or at least build up enough of it so it doesn't cost you come the end of the campaign?
It's all about working. Yeah, you keep working. That happens on the training paddock. You know, you don't stop. You know, in the end, one is a decision and the other is the execution. And, you know, sometimes it is the right decision and just the execution lets us down. Sometimes it's the reverse. But you got to keep going. You know, you got to keep being in those positions. You got to keep working at the training, and it's just repetition. And, you know, come the games, you know, when you got that confidence and belief, then it should happen naturally. You know, it's not something that, you know, we're worried about. It's definitely something that's frustrating at times, absolutely. But in the end, we always create enough chances to be in a match and potentially win them. And today was no different. But again, it's 14 shots and only 3 on target. That's not efficient enough.
So when you're talking about repetition, you just mean like practicing your patterns of play, just practicing the shooting and that sort of stuff, or is it more mindset sort of stuff that you work on in training?
No, we work on both. We work on both because in the end, when you are in front of goal, there's a certain level of expectation on your technique and your decision. But obviously, you also got to have the right mind frame, to be calm under pressure and to be calm in that moment and to have clarity in the decision you're about to make. And then your technique is the one that's going to get you over the line. And, that's work we constantly do with our players, and we just keep doing that because in the end, we've got to keep improving, and that's part of the process of improving.
Just curious, it looked pretty fiery and at times sort of spiteful out there. Did you find that? I know Brisbane are a pretty physical team and your boys don't really back down either.
Yeah, no, we didn't take a backward step today in that regard, that's for sure. But no, it wasn't, it wasn't that bad. And for me, it was a decent game. In the end, you know what you're going to get with them, and you got to match them physically and then let the ball take over. But yeah, I mean, credit to them in the second half. They improved, and when we needed to put the pedal down, we didn't, and that's something that's on us. And we've got to look back at that and take all the positives out of tonight. We're not be happy with the point. We're definitely not happy with the point. It is upsetting. It's not what we wanted, but we'll take that point because it's better than nothing.
Going into a derby, obviously, what can you take away? Is it, as you said off the top, it felt like a loss? I mean, it's always a little. You never need motivation for a derby, but I imagine it's nice to have a little bit of extra going into it. Yeah,
it's a big match now, and we recover well. We put this game behind us. We review what we need to review, and it's another opponent, a totally different opponent, and a different match. And like we always say, form probably doesn't count when there's a derby. It goes out the window. So we get ourselves ready, and then we look forward to next Saturday night here, and we'll do everything we can to make sure we improve from tonight and do everything we need to on the training paddock. So come Saturday night, we're ready to go.
Just any injuries to come out today? You come out of it all right, you reckon?
No, I think everyone's fine. From all reports, everyone's good to go. So that's a positive as well.
Days. Right, thanks, Arthur. Appreciate it.